Awesome. And I'm going to go ahead and press record, I think. Okay. So, hey everyone, thank you for joining us. I'm SJ with Commission Shift, and I'm joined today by Virginia Palacios, Commission Shift's Executive Director, and we are going to talk through the Railroad Commission Oil and Gas Open Meeting. This is a roughly once a month open meeting that happens in Austin, and our railroad commissioners meet to discuss oil and gas order items of business. And infamously, the meeting has hundreds of agenda items and lasts between 30 minutes, sometimes 45, an hour if it's, a really long meeting day. But in order to sort of bring a more transparency and more understanding to all those different agenda items, we are setting up this time to discuss and reflect on the highlights from these meetings and what's being decided and what that means for the rest of us here in Texas. So I will turn it over to Virginia to talk through some of the things that we highlighted that Commission Shift was following in today's open meeting. And there's I think, some pretty interesting things that came up.
Yeah, all kinds of stuff. It was a kind of an important day. This is the last meeting of the year. So it's kind of, I took the time to kind of reflect on all the things that we've asked for throughout the year and put together a report card for the Railroad Commission. And so that was the public input that I gave at the end of the meeting was just a summary of their report card. So just teasing that, but I'll talk more about that at the end of this debrief. So the meeting started out with some items we won't discuss, but one of the first items that we were interested in was this McBride waste pit facility that's out in Shelby County. This is the home county of Commissioner Christian. And it's this waste pit permit has been recommended for denial in the past. About a year ago, this came up, and the commission didn't vote on it, and they just passed it to a future session. And so there's been all this work on the permit over the past year. It's protested by neighbors of the facility, and again, the Railroad Commission staff who have looked at this permit application were recommending that it be denied. And again, the Railroad Commission punted it to a future conference. And so it's unfortunate that we're not seeing the railroad commissioners simply deny a permit. Like we too often, I think, see them, postpone or allow the companies to keep coming back over and over again and make adjustments to their permit application. People on the ground who have been dealing with protesting permits like these have in some cases spent upwards of 6 figures trying to protest these permit applications. And it ends up costing so much money because the commission lets these companies come back over and over and over again. And so it's not really a fair process when it comes down to, the people whose water is going to be impacted, whose livelihoods are going to be impacted, having to wait out these companies that have, millions of dollars invested in their facility or their company. So that one got punted at the request of Commissioner Wright. We also didn't know what to expect with this particular facility because Chairman Craddock received a $10,000 donation from the company in, I think it was April of this year, toward her reelection campaign, and also has received smaller contributions from the company, over the past few years. So, yeah, weren't sure what to expect there.
I'm curious, Virginia, the permit was recommended to be denied by Railroad Commission staff. Could you speak to the grounds that they were saying, like why they thought it should be denied?
Now I have to remember. Essentially these waste pit permits are supposed to be designed to protect groundwater, and ultimately the staff didn't feel like they had the facility designed properly to be able to protect groundwater. And so I'm trying to see if I had written any other notes about this. Yeah, oh, no. Oh, you know what? I also want to know the local water supply corporation was also protesting this permit. And yeah, I think the other part that I had in my notes was that oh no, sorry, no further details. This stuff can be looked up. If you look at the Railroad Commission agenda, each item will have a docket number on it. And the Railroad Commission has an app on their website called Cases. And you can go to that Cases app and then type in like the last 4 or 5 digits of that docket number. And usually you can find the case and look at the proposed decision and the final order and all that. That's if you're a nerd like me.
I appreciate you though pointing out that when permits are delayed, it's a cost to the people fighting them. Like it's not just, oh, it gets delayed. It's that delay costs somebody something, right? It's there's an expense involved and incurred in that with people that are opposing.
Yeah, and so it's not fair, right? There's an environmental injustice component there where a person who doesn't have a bunch of money to spend on a lawyer or expert witnesses, or really like waiting out these companies year after year is not going to be able to be successful in protecting their own water supply. And so it's a system that favors people who have wealth, but even then it is very hard for those people to effectively fight these permits. So that's what we say when we mean environmental injustice. It's like if the justice system cannot possibly work for you, then there is an injustice, right? And so there's a system that needs to change there.
So there was also a permit, I'm thinking about the next item that we were looking at, item 8, which also has to do with waste treatment and disposal. Is that right?
Yeah, so there was another, surface landfill facility up for permitting. That permit was granted in 2018, but they never constructed the facility. And so the operator, it was like protested to some extent. The operator reapplied for permitting, but the protesting operator had said that the contact stormwater plan was incomplete. Contact stormwater is like if there's a rainfall event and it does come into contact with the waste, but the fluid then is able to run off somewhere else on site, you have to have a plan for how you're going to catch that fluid and prevent it from impacting waterways or neighboring land or something like that. And so they went ahead and approved this permit today under the condition that the operator construct a temporary contact stormwater pond with certain specifications and requiring at least 2 feet of freeboard. Freeboard is like an extra space in the pit where the berm is so that like you're expecting waste to fill up the pit to a certain amount, and then if there's a rainfall event that'll fill up the pit to a certain amount, and then you have to design the pit so that there's an extra 2 feet of freeboard right there.
All right, and so in the case of this operation facility, what was decided today in terms of that
They passed it and they just have to design their pit, their contact stormwater pit to be different.
Okay.
Yeah, so they're gonna make some changes to it. So, at the end of the day, it could be okay.
All right. Yeah, better than better than passing it without any of those kinds of requirements for safety, right?
Yeah. So then after that, there were a bunch of P5 organization report denials. So every oil and gas well operator in Texas has to have a P5 organization report on file with the Railroad Commission. And it's just a document that has like the name of the operator, who their corporate officers are, and basically like one person who's responsible at the end of the day if they go bankrupt and orphan a bunch of wells. And operators have to renew this document every year with the Railroad Commission. And when they renew the document, they have to prove that they have complied with all of the inactive well plugging requirements for their entire well population. And so if they have inactive wells, they either have to plug those wells within a year of the well being inactive, or they have to apply for a plugging extension. And when they apply for a plugging extension, there's like 6 different options they have for different kinds of information they can submit to the Railroad Commission to get those plugging extensions. They're pretty easy to get, but in this case, there were over a dozen operators, I think, on the list that had not met their inactive well plugging requirements or extension requirements, and so their P5 was being denied. And so that means these operators won't be able to operate in Texas anymore. And as these items were approved by the commissioners, Chairman Craddock noted these are a bunch of orphan wells now that we're likely going to have to take on. And so, there was this frustration in her voice when she said that. And so it's like, that tells me, the commission is tired of the number of orphan wells increasing. We've been asking them to do something about this problem since 2021 at least. And it has been 4 years now, and the numbers keep going up. And so I think they're wanting to see some change. But to be honest, we need the Railroad Commission to have access to more funds to be able to plug orphan wells, but we also severely need the state legislature to change the laws that are requiring the Railroad Commission to continue allowing plugging extensions year after year. Until we deal with the inactive well population, this is a population of wells that still has active profiting operators on file. We're not going to be able to deal with the orphaned well problem. And so, yeah, it was just an interesting energy today in terms of hearing the commissioner's sentiments on this particular issue.
Maybe this is
Interest,
a quick segue, Virginia,
yeah.
to maybe connect the dots for us about legislative and like things that can happen at the legislature that affect the Railroad Commission or that could affect how the Railroad Commission operates, and maybe a little teaser for our legislative priorities looking ahead in 2025.
Yeah, sure. So, the state legislature sets laws that our state agencies then have to follow or promulgate rules so that operators can follow those rules. And so, the first place you look, or at least the place you would look for accountability over the Railroad Commission is the state legislature. But in this case, the state legislature wrote prescriptive laws telling the Railroad Commission when it has to allow operators to be able to not plug their wells. And so this law right now is like so prescriptive that the Railroad Commission can't do very much to make operators plug their wells in a more timely manner. Like their options are really limited at the agency level. And so it's time to look back at these inactive well plugging extensions that are in statute and change it so that it can meet us where we're at in the modern era, where we have 150,000 inactive wells throughout the state that operators keep punting to a future year.
Makes sense. And so that takes us to towards the end of the open meeting this morning, when we got into the administrative matters. And that's where we sort of heard more. We had not just news about the waste pits rule, but we heard more from the commissioners. They each kind of took turns speaking. So maybe we can kind of talk through what you were in the room, what you heard, and the decision that they made today.
Yeah, so this waste pit rulemaking has been something that the Railroad Commission has been working on for at least 2 years now. Actually, Commissioner Wright mentioned 4 years. And so it really has been a long time that they've been working on it. And so this was an issue that Commissioner Wright ran for office on. And so he primarily got elected because all of the other waste pit companies that he works with helped him get elected, right? And so one of the first things he started doing was working with the industry to rewrite the rule that applies to them, which some might say is a conflict of interest. And in fact, I think it was October, at the October open meeting, I had asked the railroad commissioners, if you have a personal financial interest in the outcome of this rule, even though it's legal for you to do this, you should disclose that personal financial interest. And Commissioner Wright, of course, has companies that are going to benefit from the end result of this waste pit rule. And nobody said anything today about their ownership or their personal financial interests in these companies. They don't have to. It was just a courtesy. It would have been nice for them to do that. But yeah, it's unfortunate to see them continuing to make decisions about things that are ultimately going to lead to more profits for them. And so the rule was approved today. Nobody has seen the final draft, and and you don't get to see it until after they approve it. I've been running around all day today, so I haven't checked to see if it's posted on their website yet. But I'm sure it will be soon. Yeah, Commissioner Wright spoke first before they officially approved the rule. He thanked staff for their hard work on the rule. Paul Dubois and Haley Cochran were kind of the technical permitting director and the rules coordinator that have been really like trying to field our concerns and comments and complaints as well as those of the industry and like merging all those interests, those different interests into a final rulemaking. He noted it's been 40 years since the rule was updated, and importantly, he pointed out that we shouldn't be waiting 40 years to update really important rules like this. We've got to be able to like kind of come in as we need to year after year and make some surgical changes to these rules so that they reflect modern day. So I appreciate that comment because that is a good governance practice, right? To make sure that rules and laws are updated to work for the present day. Let me see what else he said that was interesting. Commissioner Craddock also thanked Wright for his leadership and Paul and Haley, and just appreciated the comments and participation from a lot of different parties. Christian similarly thanked Wright and thanked him for being open to all those suggestions that came their way. So we will see. Some of the things that Christian said led me to believe that there's still going to be some strange patchwork things in this rule where they were trying to meet every operator's or every different sector's desires instead of doing something that would make sense and kind of set a level playing field for everyone. So we'll see kind of what ends up in the final rule.
I
Yeah.
think we've kind of mentioned this in other places, but there was a huge response in terms of feedback and comments that were made during the comment period. I think it's something over 600 comments came in for this rule and, you know, the feedback that comes with that. What do you think the likelihood is, judging the turnaround time between when comments were submitted and when they're coming out with this final draft? What do you make of that timeline, and what does that tell you, I guess, to what do you expect to see in the final rule?
So yeah, there were 650 comments more or less, and we wrote 130 pages of comments and submitted thousands of pages of exhibits to support our comments. And so they only had 60 days to look through all of those comments. And so it makes me feel like, you know, our concerns might have been sort of, you know, swept away as in, you know, this isn't in the scope of this rulemaking. That's kind of what we see a lot in these rulemakings when they choose not to accept our feedback. And so we will see whether they meaningfully you know, considered our comments or if they just tried to get something through before the legislative session starts in January.
So maybe we should move to the public input section of the meeting. Maybe just as a final note for waste pits rulemakings, we do have resources on our website at commissionshift.org, where if you type in waste pits or go to our work section, there's some resources, not just in terms of some one-pagers about what's highlights that have been in the rule before, concerns that we have that we want to see, you know, strengthened responses in the rule. But there's also a GIS map where you can see some of these sites and areas of concern that have to do with, you know, maybe operator compliance or things that people have reported having experienced near these waste pits. So all that's on our website, and I would encourage folks to take a look at that. But yeah, let's go to the public input part of the meeting, and I think we should definitely talk about Skylar White's comments, and then we can dig into this report card that you delivered and maybe some more details, because it was a pretty detailed report card. There's more in the writing of it than in your oral comments. So maybe we can get into that too.
Yeah. Okay, so Skylar told on Oxy USA, that's an operator out in the Permian Basin, well, all over Texas, but Occidental Petroleum and their subsidiaries are applying for a permit in Ector County right now to be the first Class 6 long-term carbon dioxide injection well in Texas. And so That's why this is relevant. And so he said he has a lot of different operators on his property, and by far Oxy USA is the trashiest operator on his ranches. And so he said he had checked the transducers on some of their injection wells, and there was a 400 psi pressure outside the tubing, and it should be 0. I later sat down with him, and he walked me through all the pressure test reports that they have been submitting to the Railroad Commission. And sure enough, month after month, you see pressure readings on this well that should have 0 pressure coming out of it. And that just goes to show a failure of the Railroad Commission to have enough oversight staff or even enough IT staff to develop a kind of red flag on these wells that are showing pressure readings but should not be. And so he kind of described a story of where he has some documentation that the well at one point failed. They did a workover, the pressure went to 0. And then at some point, the pressure started to go back up in 2012, and it's been up ever since. And they should be failing their pressure tests, which are required every 5 years, but the tests have been shown to be passing, and they have not been witnessed by the Railroad Commission. And so this is an issue where it seems like whenever these types of tests are witnessed by the Railroad Commission, they fail, and then whenever they are not witnessed, they surprisingly pass. And so we also have been talking to Skylar about the need for the legislature to address this problem and to allow landowners or their representative to go out and witness these kinds of tests. He also
Oh,
mentioned,
sorry. I was
oh
gonna
yeah,
ask a clarifying question.
sure.
I'm curious, just what does a pressure reading mean in terms of like, why does that matter? Why do people, why is that something that people have to check at regular intervals? What does that have to do with like safety or health or anything like that?
Yeah, so it means that there's produced water coming up through the wellbore, and if it's like pressurized and it's not being released, then it could also like uh, cause problems in the structural integrity of the wellbore. And because the well hasn't been plugged, this could eventually like break through into usable quality groundwater.
Okay, so it's a big indication if there might, it could prevent, if you're reading pressure readings, then you would have the information maybe to do something before you get water breaking through or other kinds of releases.
Yeah, ideally. And, there's pressure, and so there could actually already be some groundwater contamination. And so, yeah, he even mentioned, Skylar mentioned possibly needing to drill some water monitoring wells nearby just to be able to see how the aquifer is doing. But he kind of concluded his remarks by saying, y'all, the Railroad Commission, are doing a poor job of overseeing these wells. And you're asking for a Class 6 primacy from the EPA to be able to regulate a new type of well, carbon dioxide injection wells. And he said, you need to learn how to take care of what you have before doing something else. And so, we've been saying the same thing. We agree that the Railroad Commission shouldn't be pursuing Class 6 primacy. It would be a bad idea for the EPA to grant that to the Railroad Commission because we have just way too many problems in this state.
Yeah. And so after Skylar spoke, you were the second and final person to give input today. And now we're up to the report card moment. So maybe we can talk through some of your comments.
Sure. So I made a report card for the Railroad Commission. The overall grade they got was unsatisfactory, but I just made sure to note to them that they have made improvements in 7 out of 16 areas that I graded them on. And so, if they keep making improvements over time, some of those unsatisfactory marks are going to turn into satisfactory. And so, it's not meant to shame them necessarily, but it is meant to show them like we're tracking the things that we're asking them for, especially the things that are already under their authority and their jurisdiction. And we're just asking them to make some changes here and there, and we're hoping to see them make legitimate changes, not just like Oh yeah, we did a little thing over here, and you should just accept that because now there's an improvement. And so we will give them credit when they're improving, but we're not going to say that we're done on an issue until they actually reach what we're asking for. And so I don't know if we want to go through everything that's on the report card because that might take a while. You saw the report card, SJ. Is there anything you want to talk about?
Well, I know in your general comments, you talked about language access and the sort of the public engagement aspect of the Railroad Commission, and you had some good things to say about progress, and maybe we could kind of cover that. But there was also some things you noted that had to do with flaring, I believe, that were maybe more of the definitely needs improvement category. So maybe you could speak to those, and then I'm going to scan these other 16 categories. And see if
While I'm
there's
talking
some other
about this.
standouts.
Sure. So there has been progress on language access at the commission, and it's just been a little thing here and a little thing there, and they're definitely not done creating a polished language access program, but we're encouraged by the fact that they're trying, and we're really grateful for that. And so they did provide language interpretation at one open meeting. They also provided interpretation at one of the rulemaking public hearings that they did in Austin this year. That public hearing was mostly for industry because they held it in the middle of the day in Austin. And like, Austin has no oil and gas development. Most of the oil and gas development is in different parts of the state that are hours away. So it's a little frustrating the way they did that. But they also translated some of their documents into Spanish. They do these plain language rule summaries anytime they have a rulemaking proposed. And so they did that for the waste pit rulemaking and some other rulemakings they opened this year. They also translated the monitoring and enforcement plan, which is something they've been doing 3 years in a row now, which is nice. We've been asking them to do that. There's a widget on their website that now translates the whole website, and they have a civil rights email address. So if there's any kinds of discrimination complaints, there's a place to go to file that kind of a complaint now. In the monitoring and enforcement plan, they asked for comments from the public before they drafted the plan, and then they accepted most of our comments into that plan and most of our substantive recommendations, that is. And so we were really happy to see that. That was a huge departure from prior years where they just basically made formatting changes to the plan. And so we're looking for, we kind of talked about the different things they listed in the monitoring and enforcement plan that were things that we asked for. And so they said they were going to do more inspections on flaring compliance, provide more comprehensive flaring data to the public, and demonstrate their compliance activities related to waste pits. In the past, there hadn't been any enforcement on the waste pits, really. They had no enforcement staff. And they also said that they were gonna they were gonna evaluate all the different ways that they could ensure that orphaned wells greater than 20 years old could be reduced from their list in a more timely manner. And so they're gonna be really trying to use all their resources to do that. As well as enhancing training associated with long-term carbon dioxide storage wells.
Related to this topic of public engagement too is the issue of offering virtual public input. That was on the report card as a request, and under satisfactory it says no, and under improving it says no. And so that's, I think, maybe one piece, a huge piece that's missing from their public engagement plan is, will they offer this? And why haven't they until this point? Maybe you could speak to that item.
Yeah, we asked for this back in April, and then we brought it up again last month. And so we're going to keep asking them on that because that's something that should be an easy thing for them to move from unsatisfactory to satisfactory. So they'll get a better report card next year if they do that. And it shouldn't take much. We did talk to some of the staff at the last open meeting, and they noted times when they've tried it before, they didn't really have the technology figured out. And so there was some feedback and different things they had to deal with to run a hybrid meeting where they had somebody on Zoom and then the people in the room had sound to hear what they were saying. So I think there's some technical issues they'll need to figure out, but I think it's possible. important to note, if anybody comes in person to the open meeting next month, it's going to be in a different room. They're moving it to, I think, the 7th floor. I think they're doing some construction or renovations in that building, and so it's going to be in a different place. But yeah, I think virtual public input is going to make it a lot easier for a lot of people to bring important information to the commissioners so that they can all learn together. We talked about this last month and how important it is for the railroad commissioners to hear from the public all at once and not require separate meetings for everyone.
Yeah, and if you missed that, that was part of an exchange that happened between Virginia and Commissioner Christian during the last public input section of the open meeting. So if you want to look back at that, it's on our site and it's on the Railroad Commission site under their archives of public meetings or open meetings. Is there any other report card items? I think it sounds like what you're saying is a lot of things remain to be seen. In the new year, we'll be looking to see if they deliver on some of the things that they've acknowledged that they want to do or should be doing, right?
Yeah, and so you know, I think, yeah, there's all kinds of stuff on here. And this report card is just based off of things that we've asked them for at the open meetings. And so it's not necessarily like a full report card of all the issues that we're working on at Commission Shift. It's kind of just the stuff that we've been asking them for all year that they've had all year to work on. And so, you know, we'll definitely be bringing some of our priorities back in January for them to consider so they know what they're going to get graded on next year.
Nice. So that's pretty much wraps up our open meeting coverage and the things that happened this morning. We'll definitely be excited, I think, to see, yeah, where things go next year. I feel like we're in that reflective mood with it being the end of the year and wrapping up certain projects and making plans for the continuation of others. But yeah, any final thoughts, Virginia, as we close out this year and ring in a new one?
We, you know, there were a lot of surprising things that happened throughout the year. You know, you never know when a well is going to blow out, or when there's going to be some kind of disaster. And like, sadly, that keeps happening in Texas. Even though we've been asking the commission to do a better job, for years now. So there's things like that. There's other, you know, surprising wins that we have throughout the year. We put together a little holiday Railroad Commission bingo for things that weren't on our bingo card at the beginning of the year, but now are on our bingo card. And so I'm sure we'll get that out on social media in the coming days, and y'all can play Railroad Commission bingo with us.
Yeah, and thanks to everyone who has been so engaged this year. Community members that have given public input or have signed on to comments. It really does make a difference, and it's really encouraging to see how that presence is influencing and shaping and pressuring the agency to do better. So that's something I'm grateful for this year. It's been really a roller coaster of so many things, and yeah, there's a lot of gratitude, I think, for all the people that are on this journey with us, to sort of hold accountability for this state agency. So thank you.
Yeah, and you know, yeah, just acknowledging it can take a lot of effort and time and energy to sit down and write a comment, or especially to come out to the open meetings in person. And so a lot of thanks to anyone who did that. And if you signed a petition or shared a post or told someone what the Railroad Commission really does, we really appreciate you, because it is working. Railroad Commission staff are working hard to start addressing some of the things we've been bringing up. And you know, what we're hearing in the legislature is that there's some pressure that's building, and people are starting to make some moves and try to remedy some of these situations. So keep it up, and thank you.
Awesome. All right, we'll be back in January when the Railroad Commission open meetings resume. And until then, I hope everyone has a great holiday break, and we will keep you posted for all the oil and gas developments in the coming year. Thanks, Virginia.
Bye.